They thought they could scare them into silence, but instead, they may have just triggered the one thing Meghan fears more than headlines, more than rumors, more than public opinion: discovery, the cold clinical legal process where secrets don't stay buried, where private timelines become public exhibits, and where the story is no longer controlled by interviews, documentaries, or carefully worded statements, but by documents, witnesses, and sworn testimony. Because behind palace walls and California gates, something has clearly shifted, and the whispers are no longer staying in drawing rooms and private clubs. They are moving toward courtrooms, and that is an entirely different game. And this is where everything starts to feel different, because the moment legal threats started flying, the tone changed. Lady C didn't retreat. Tom Bower didn't soften his words. If anything, they became calmer, more precise, almost like two people who know something the rest of the world doesn't yet know, and are simply waiting for the right room, the right chair, the right moment for someone to ask the right question under oath. And that is what has people talking, because lawsuits don't just silence people, lawsuits open doors. Doors to emails, doors to timelines, doors to medical records, travel records, staff testimonies, and private communications that were never meant to be seen by anyone outside a very small circle. Those 4 words, "let him sue me," didn't sound like fear. They sounded like an invitation. And people who understand how defamation law works immediately notice the shift, because in a defamation case, the person suing has to prove the claim is false. Not just offensive, not just damaging, but false. And proving something is false means producing the truth. Documents, dates, names, records. Suddenly, the entire conversation changes from television interviews and podcast stories to paperwork and timelines and signatures. And this is where Tom Bower's role becomes very interesting, because he is not known for making loud claims and disappearing. He is known for building slow cases, document by document, source by source, conversation by conversation, until a picture forms that is very hard to shake. And according to what has been quietly hinted, not loudly announced, not officially confirmed, but hinted, the kind of hint that appears in interviews, in offhand remarks, in careful wording, there are gaps. Not loud gaps, not obvious gaps, but small, strange, uncomfortable gaps that don't behave the way normal timelines behave. And the reason this matters is because of something most people don't understand about court. Court is not Twitter. Court is not Netflix. Court is not a documentary where you control the final edit. In court, the other side gets to ask questions, and not friendly questions either. Precise questions, annoying questions, repetitive questions. Questions about dates, about times, about who was present, about who signed what, about which doctor was there, about which hospital room was used, about who witnessed what and when. Discovery. That single word is what has reportedly changed the mood behind the scenes, because discovery is the one phase where everything either becomes very simple very quickly or very complicated very quickly. There is no middle ground. Either the documents match the story perfectly and everything ends quietly, or the documents raise more questions than they answer, and then the questions don't go away anymore because they are now inside a legal process, not a media cycle. And what makes this even more explosive is that this is all happening at the same time as another legal situation where sworn statements and depositions are already part of the process, which means lawyers are already involved, timelines are already being discussed, statements are already being compared, and once you are already in one legal process, stepping into another becomes less unthinkable than it once was. Because here is the uncomfortable truth that keeps being whispered in media circles and legal circles at the same time. Once you enter a courtroom, the story no longer belongs to you. It belongs to the process. And the process does not care about image, brand, narrative, or public sympathy. It cares about consistency, dates matching, stories matching, records matching. And if everything matches, the case dies quietly and the people making accusations look foolish. But if everything does not match, then the case does not die quietly at all. And this is why the phrase reportedly furious keeps appearing. Because fury usually comes from one thing: loss of control. Not fear, not panic, control. When you can no longer control who speaks, who writes, who asks questions, who demands documents, who compares timelines, who calls witnesses, and who decides what becomes public record, that is when even very powerful people start to feel the ground move slightly under their feet. repeat. Because for years, this entire story has been fought in the media, in interviews, in books, in documentaries, in statements, in carefully managed appearances. But a courtroom is different. In a courtroom, you don't tell your story once. You tell it again and again and again, and every time the other side looks for the one detail that changes, the one date that moves, the one sentence that doesn't match the previous version, the one document that says something slightly different. And the people who have been watching this for a long time, not the loud commentators, but the quiet legal observers, keep saying the same thing. If this ever reaches a courtroom, the real story will not come out in a dramatic confession or a shocking announcement. It will come out slowly, quietly, in boring documents, in corrected timelines, in small contradictions that don't look dramatic on their own, but together form a pattern that is impossible to ignore. And that is why this situation feels like it is building towards something rather than ending, because nobody is backing down. Not the writers, not the commentators, not the lawyers, and definitely not the people who believe that if you threaten court, you must be prepared for what court actually does. Because the most dangerous thing about court is not losing. The most dangerous thing about court is discovery. And right now, everything, the anger, the silence, the legal letters, the interviews, the hints, the statements, the timing of everything seems to be circling around that one word like a storm cloud that hasn't decided yet whether it's going to pass or break. And the reason this story refuses to die is because every time it looks like it might fade away, something pulls it back into the light again. A comment, a legal move, a deposition date, a quiet interview where someone chooses their words very carefully, and suddenly the entire conversation starts again, but this time a little louder, a little more specific, a little less deniable than before. Because what is happening now doesn't look like random gossip anymore. It looks like positioning. Everyone is positioning. Lawyers are positioning. Authors are positioning. Even the silence feels like positioning. What people don't realize is that legal battles are not just fought in courtrooms. They are fought in public perception before anyone even steps into a courtroom. And right now, the public narrative is being shaped piece by piece, interview by interview, statement by statement, until a very specific picture forms in people's minds. A picture of two sides walking toward each other, both claiming they are ready, both claiming they have proof, both claiming the truth is on their side, and both waiting for the other to make the first irreversible move. Because once that move happens, once a lawsuit is officially filed and cannot be quietly withdrawn without consequences, everything changes. Suddenly there are deadlines. Suddenly there are sworn statements. Suddenly there are depositions where answers cannot be edited later. Suddenly there are legal consequences for changing a story, even slightly. And that is why some people believe the real battle right now is not happening in public at all, but behind closed doors, where legal teams are trying to decide whether going forward is more dangerous than staying silent. What makes this even more fascinating is the timing of everything. The timing of interviews, the timing of statements, the timing of when certain topics are brought up again after being quiet for months. Timing in legal strategy is never random. It is planned, calculated, and often designed to apply pressure without ever stepping into a courtroom. Because sometimes the threat of discovery is more powerful than discovery itself. And that brings us back to the central question that keeps hanging over everything like a shadow that refuses to move. If everyone is so confident, why hasn't anyone taken the final step yet? Because confidence in public and confidence in court are two very different things. In public, you can say anything. In court, you have to prove everything. The people watching this closely keep pointing out the same detail over and over again. The language being used has changed. It is no longer vague. It is no longer general. It is becoming very specific. Words like records, words like timelines, words like witnesses, words like discovery. These are not gossip words. These are legal words. And when gossip starts sounding like legal language, it usually means something is happening behind the scenes that the public cannot see yet. And then there is the reaction, because reactions tell you everything. Silence can be a strategy. Anger can be a strategy. Legal letters can be a strategy. But when multiple strategies start appearing at the same time, silence in one place, anger in another place, legal pressure somewhere else, it usually means one thing. Pressure is being felt somewhere. And according to people who claim to understand how these situations work, pressure creates mistakes. Not big dramatic mistakes like in movies. Small mistakes. A date that doesn't match. A statement that contradicts an older statement. A timeline that overlaps in a way that doesn't make sense. And in normal life, those mistakes disappear in the noise of everyday news. But in legal situations, those small mistakes become very big problems, because lawyers are trained to find exactly those small inconsistencies inconsistencies and pull on them until the entire story either tightens and holds together or starts to unravel. There is also something else that has people paying very close attention now, and that is the word deposition. Because a deposition is not a television interview. It is not a friendly conversation. It is hours and hours of questions, sometimes the same question asked 10 different ways, the same date asked in 5 different forms, the same event described again and again until the lawyers are satisfied that the story does not change even slightly under pressure. And once a deposition exists, it exists forever. You cannot take it back. You cannot edit it. You cannot clarify it later in a documentary. It becomes a permanent record. And if another case ever happens in the future, lawyers can bring that deposition back and compare every word to any new statement ever made again. That is why depositions are where many cases are actually won or lost long before a trial even begins. So when you hear people say that tensions are rising, that anger is rising, that legal teams are getting more involved, what they are really saying, without saying it directly, is that the situation may be moving from a media war to a legal war. And those are two completely different battlefields with completely different rules. Because in a media war, the loudest voice often wins. But in a legal war, the most consistent story wins. Not the most emotional, not the most popular, the most consistent. The story that does not change even when every detail is examined under a microscope. And this is why this story feels like it is reaching a pressure point. Not an ending, a pressure point. The point where someone has to decide whether to push forward and risk everything becoming public, or step back and let the rumors continue forever but never actually be tested in the one place where rumors either die permanently or become something much bigger. Right now, nobody knows which way this goes. Not the commentators, not the journalists, not even the people involved. Because once legal machinery starts moving, it moves in its own direction, and sometimes even the people who started it cannot control where it ends. But one thing is certain, and this is the part that makes this story so explosive and so dangerous at the same time: if this ever fully reaches a courtroom, the story will stop being a story. It will become a record. And records do not disappear. Records do not forget. Records sit in archives and files and databases forever, waiting for anyone years later to open a folder and read what was said, what was claimed, what was proven, and what was never proven at all. And that is why the anger, the legal threats, the silence, the interviews, the hints, the careful wording, the timing of everything, all of it feels like pieces moving on a chessboard where nobody wants to make the move that ends the game, but everyone is trying to force the other side to make it first. Because the person who files the case may not be the person who wins the case. The person who speaks the loudest may not be the person who survives the documents. And the person who looks calmest right now may be calm for a reason that nobody fully understands yet. And somewhere in the middle of all of this, one question just refuses to go away. No matter how many interviews happen, no matter how many statements are released, no matter how many threats are made, no matter how many articles are written, the question remains the same. Simple, quiet, but incredibly powerful because of how simple it is. If everything is exactly as it has been said for years, then why does the word discovery make everyone so nervous? Because in the end, this entire story may not be decided by interviews, or books, or documentaries, or public opinion. It may be decided by paperwork.